Hi and welcome. I'm Mandi Miacha and you are watching A News. Here are the headlines. The US launches strikes on Iran, targeting maritime trade. EU chiefs sign a new drone production deal with Ukraine on a trip to Kiev. And the confirmed number of Ebola cases in the Democratic Republic of Congo passes the 2,000 mark. Thank you for tuning in. The United States military has launched a fresh wave of airstrikes against Iran, targeting assets used to disrupt international maritime trade. In an official statement released on the social media platform X, U.S. Central Command confirmed the operation began at 6 a.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday, specifically aiming to degrade military capabilities deployed against commercial shipping in the strategic Strait of Hormuz. Now, the new strikes come as the U.S. military reimposes its naval blockade of Iran's ports. However, Tehran insists the Strait of Hormuz will remain closed, claiming at least 30 of its citizens have been killed in recent days.
The United States has restored its naval blockade of Iranian ports, marking another escalation in the conflict with Tehran. Washington says the move is aimed at weakening Iran's military capabilities and protecting commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. Speaking to Fox News, President Donald Trump warned that the campaign would intensify unless Iran agreed to resume negotiations.
I'll save the energy targets for last, but ultimately we'll hit energy targets, yeah. But we're going to hit them very hard tonight. We're going to hit them very hard tomorrow night. We're going to hit them very hard the night after. And then next week it gets really bad for them because next week comes the power plants. Next week comes the bridges. We're going to knock out all their power plants. We're going to knock out all their bridges unless they get to the table and negotiate.
Trump said the blockade now applies to all Iranian ports. He added that commercial traffic to other Gulf states would still be allowed. The US president also dropped his earlier proposal to charge ships using the Strait of Hormuz, saying he would instead seek investment deals with Gulf countries. Tehran rejected the latest warning. Deputy Foreign Minister Kazem Garibabadi said military pressure and economic measures would not force Iran back to the negotiating table. Overnight, Iranian forces confirmed it carried out drone attacks on US positions in Jordan. Iran's Revolutionary Guard said it had targeted facilities in Bahrain and Kuwait, adding that the Strait of Hormuz would remain closed. Meanwhile, the US Central Command said American forces had launched additional strikes on targets in Iran, releasing video showing aircraft taking off and ground targets being hit. The deadlock comes as Washington has asserted repeatedly that Iran must never have a nuclear weapon, something Tehran denies seeking, while Iran wants the end to sanctions and for other nations to recognize its control over the strait.
Meanwhile, Iran's Revolutionary Guards say they have targeted several American military sites in the latest attacks. Iranian officials have warned there will be no compromise over the Strait of Hormuz. A News' Turah Shiralilu reports from Tehran.
Iran's Revolutionary Guards said it targeted U.S. military facilities at the Al-Azraq base in Jordan and pounded an American logistics center in Kuwait, as well as the United States 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain, late on Tuesday and early Wednesday. According to the Sepah News website covering the forces' statements, the attacks were a continuation of Iran's reprisal operations against the U.S. military campaign on Iran. The attacks follow Washington's threats of withdrawing from the ceasefire deal with Tehran that was signed in June. Meantime, President Masoud Pezeshkian said that Iran will defend every inch of its territory after U.S. President Donald Trump retweeted his earlier post suggesting occupation of the Iranian islands in the Persian Gulf. The state-owned IRNA news agency quoted him as saying that Trump's renewed threats on bombing Iran's energy infrastructure, as well as his remarks against the Iranian nation, reflect the U.S. chief executive's hatred of Iranians. Also, Army spokesman Brigadier General Mohammad Akraminia said that the Iranian armed forces would not make the slightest compromise over the Strait of Hormuz. The general stressed that the only way for the United States to reopen the strategic waterway is to respect the rights of the Iranian nation and to comply with the terms of the Iran-US Memorandum of Understanding to end the war. In New York, Iran's ambassador and permanent representative to the United Nations rejected claims made by the American ambassador Tammy Bruce that Tehran is supporting the Houthis in Yemen. Calling the accusations baseless, Amir Saeed Iravani said that America is an aggressor, not a victim. In a letter to the UN Secretary General and the President of the Security Council, the Iranian diplomat added that the US representative at the meeting on the situation in the Middle East abused the platform of the Security Council to spread false information and make a series of baseless and politically motivated claims against Iran. In another related development, Iran's foreign ministry slammed UK labeling of the Revolutionary Guards as a security threat, describing the designation an unjustified and irresponsible measure. Turaj Shiralilu from Tehran for A-News.
Turning now to Russia-Ukraine war-related news, Ukraine and the European Union have officially signed a landmark defense partnership to launch joint military production. At a high-profile ceremony in Kiev, European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen sealed the new drone deal, while Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed the pact coincides with Ukraine nearing unprecedented capabilities to produce Patriot interceptor missiles.
I'm delighted to launch, together with you, Volodymyr, a new EU-Ukraine defense industrial partnership. What we are signing today is our very own drone deal. So the point I'm making is that we need to combine our strength. Together we can work on joint production, on making all of the components of the system work.
For the first time, Ukraine is approaching the capability to produce missiles for Patriot, and could become the third country in history to have this agreement and this privilege. And for the first time, Ukraine is building its own ballistics and deep strikes. And these are not just developments, but a real force that is already operating, which covers distances previously unreachable, 2,884 kilometers.
With another drone deal sealed by Ukraine, this time with the European Union, and warnings from NATO's eastern flank of a possible Russian sabotage in the Baltics or Poland. To talk on the latest, we're joined by security consultant and retired U.S. Army Green Beret, Brian Pickens, coming to us from Warsaw. Brian, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us on A-News. Let's start with this deal we've seen being sealed in Kiev. Can this deal that's meant to, as Ursula von der Leyen put it, combine Ukrainian ingenuity with Europe's industrial capacity help Kiev's European allies catch up with rapidly advancing drone warfare?
It does help, but we have to understand that it's not just the technology that you receive that is what's important. It's the employment of these drones and this technology in combat. So in concert with technology, we have to have the training coming out from Ukraine and the understanding of how to employ all of this equipment as well for the European nations and the West to be prepared to employ this new modern technology in combat. Innovation creates the technology, but the innovation system and process creates your innovation, your innovated product, but the product in of itself is irrelevant if we don't know how to use it. So I think there's another step that we need to involve in this as well, as that's definitely the partnering of the training processes coming out of Ukraine as well.
Ukraine has recently signed a number of deals with different countries. By Zelensky's count, it was 9, following the NATO summit in Ankara. From a practical standpoint, how long can such defense deals take to actually materialize?
I guess that depends on how these nations, how serious these nations feel that it is, right? So, you know, in America, once we decide what technology we want to create, it could take years by the point to the point that we scale it and create the product and get it to where it's going. There's a uniqueness with Ukraine. Ukraine is invading the product every single day, and they have a relevant product today. And if and it's out of necessity. They have countrymen dying every day in the battle space, and then Russia innovating on the other side. So as the innovation process happens in Ukraine, the next day they can have a drone on the front line that has been developed to solve a problem that they're seeing. So I think where there's a lot to be gained with the fact of partnering with Ukrainian technology and industry there and investing is the fact that we can kind of eliminate this process of what should we invest in and is it relevant, and compare it against other pieces. It's already combat tested. It's already relevant. It's fighting against the enemies of the free world today, and you know what you should be investing in. I've seen multiple Western products in Ukraine that have failed. I would say the mass majority of what's come out of the West has been defeated in the battle space, and a lot of these, Russia and China have figured out how to combat Western technologies, and Ukraine is what's I think the linchpin in us all being successful in future conflicts.
Brian, you're in Warsaw. Today we heard from Lithuania's president. He echoed some earlier warnings from Polish officials of a potential Russian sabotage operation in the Baltics or Poland. Kremlin dismissed the claims as quote-unquote horror stories. Do you see Russia carrying out any such operation, and what would its purpose be?
Well, a weak Europe is a good thing for Russia. The more that they can, weaken Europe and their resolve and their finances, and able to support Ukraine and invest into Ukraine and come to Ukraine's aid, that diminishes Ukraine's ability to fight in the battle space. So Russia has always wanted a weak Ukraine. So any sabotage type events, which are absolutely happening, are in the hopes of weakening NATO, weakening the European Union, getting more elements, nations to feel that they have their own internal problems that they no longer need to support or shouldn't possibly support Ukraine. But the truth is, Ukraine is standing at the tip of the spear, defending the entire free world against the war machine that is Russia and their influence in the world. And these sabotage type attacks and stuff like that, the best thing that we can do in order to defend ourselves against that is win in Ukraine. I think that's step one.
And stateside, that long-delayed Russia sanctions bill, championed by late Senator Lindsey Graham, got Donald Trump's green light. Coupled with the recent news of a political agreement on licensing Patriot production in Ukraine, has Washington, in your opinion, significantly changed course regarding the war?
Absolutely, but I mean, one, Ukraine has continued winning in the battle space. It's undeniable that Ukraine is now reaching out and hitting Moscow. That in the face of some nations pulling away from supporting Ukraine or funding coming in and out, there is no such thing as Russian-occupied Ukraine. Ukraine will win this conflict. So and for the the president that's in America and the political entities that are there, I think Ukrainian showing its resolve in conflict and strength has changed some minds. Also, Russia's aggression, hitting churches, they actively bomb civilian entities, target civilians in the battle space. There's a lot of these things that you really can't turn a blind eye to when you're looking at the strength of Ukraine, their resilience, and also their value of human life. When Ukraine only, even in deep strikes, goes after infrastructure inside of Russia, and you have Russia doing urban safari and killing civilians in the battle space or walking away from the battle space and actively claiming to have done so. So yes, Americans opinions, I believe, are changing. And, we also have the Iranian conflict. There's a lot that has happened with drones in this conflict that I know that the American military was not prepared for the drone-saturated environment that they've come into, with Iran learning as an active participant, learning from the Russian conflict, Russian-Ukraine conflict. The enemies of the United States are all learning from this and learning how to innovate, learning how to employ drones in combat actively, while we are all somewhat passive observers watching this happen. And we're not really learning as fast as we need to, or innovating the technology that we have and the equipment that we have to defend ourselves, defend our nations and our borders, and future conflicts that we may have.
Brian, there were also new pledges made in Paris at the Coalition of the Willing meeting to boost Ukraine's air defense. Joint drills were announced for the multinational force that's meant to deploy to Ukraine following any possible ceasefire. How compatible would you say the coalition's plans are with the situation on the ground?
I'm not sure exactly how the coalitions are going to come into having a part of it. I don't think I can really quite speak to that one. I'm not as knowledgeable on that specific topic, but I think it's going to be interesting to see how we think that partnership will go forward.
Brian, thank you so much for joining us here at A News and sharing your insight.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, after a short break, we'll take a closer look at Australia's and the state of New York's move to limit and regulate artificial intelligence. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're watching A News. Australia's government has unveiled new plans to regulate the use of artificial intelligence. A new Office of AI is to be established, setting standards on water and energy usage for data centers. There will also be safeguards on copyright for books, music, and artwork originating in Australia. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says the aim is to balance investment in AI with effective regulation, and will support Australia's ambition to become a global hub for AI and data centers.
So it is only natural that up until now our response has been issue by issue, sector by sector. But just as government developed coordinated approaches for other significant technologies, from civil aviation in the 1920s to genetics in the 1990s, we must do this with AI as well. Effective today, I am establishing the Office of AI in my own department of the Prime Minister and Cabinet.
Meanwhile, New York has become the first U.S. state to unveil restrictions on data center projects. A one-year moratorium is to be imposed on the construction of large new data centers. The order applies to facilities using 50 megawatts of power or more. During the pause, officials will develop statewide environmental standards while assessing the impact on electricity demand, water supplies, and local communities. The ban will be lifted once those standards are finalized. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has overseen the removal of the Gibraltar checkpoint, dismantling Western Europe's last physical frontier. The post-Brexit treaty integrated the British territory into the EU's Schengen zone at midnight. Madrid now assumes security at the peninsula's airport and port, permanently ending daily queues for thousands of commuters. Representatives from OPEC and countries participating in the Charter of Cooperation are meeting in Baku for the first technical committee session under the group's framework. Travis Richards has the details.
Representatives from OPEC member countries and countries participating in the Charter of Cooperation have gathered in Baku for the inaugural technical committee meeting, marking the first meeting of its kind under the framework. The Charter of Cooperation, signed in 2019, provides a voluntary platform for dialogue between participating oil-producing countries. It promotes long-term cooperation on issues including oil market stability, technology, innovation, and energy policy. Opening the meeting, Azerbaijan's Energy Minister Parviz Shabazov described the gathering as an important milestone in implementing the Charter. He said closer international cooperation is becoming increasingly important as the global energy market faces geopolitical tensions, economic transformation, and supply chain disruptions. According to OPEC, the Charter grew out of cooperation during the global oil market downturn between 2014 and 2016, when producers recognized the need for closer collaboration to address shared challenges. Technical experts from participating countries are expected to meet at least twice a year under the framework, with the OPEC Secretariat coordinating the committee's work. OPEC Secretary General Haitham Al-Qais is leading the organization's delegation. I'm Travis Richards in Baku for A News.
Fresh allegations of unlawful killings and abuse by British troops in Afghanistan have been presented to a public inquiry investigating alleged war crimes. Tamim Bahiz has more on that from Kabul.
British media report says 2 witnesses gave evidence behind closed doors to the Afghanistan inquiry. Both reportedly told the UK inquiry they regretted making these disclosures only now. Among the allegations is a claim that British troops mistreated Afghan detainees by throwing them from forklifts onto the ground for amusement. One witness described the alleged killing of 3 brothers said to be farmers from a village called Rahim. He did not identify the province where the incident allegedly took place. According to his testimony, the men were killed by British forces and their family later received more than £3,600 in compensation. These claims have not yet been tested publicly, and the closed-door nature of the testimony means important details remain unavailable. The evidence could be significant to the Afghanistan inquiry, which is examining alleged unlawful killings by British Special Forces and possible failures to investigate or disclose them during operations between 2010 and 2013. For Afghan families, the central question is whether the inquiry will establish individual responsibility and deliver accountability more than a decade after the alleged incidents. Tamim Bahiz in Kabul, A News.
Keir Starmer has delivered an emotional final PMQs and chaired his last cabinet meeting as Britain prepares for Andy Burnham to take over as Prime Minister. A News' UK correspondent Ollie Barrett reports.
For the Cabinet and for the House of Commons, these were really the big goodbyes. Keir Starmer hasn't actually left the role of Labour leader or Prime Minister yet, but it's his final cabinet meeting, and during that cabinet meeting he was presented with a carriage clock by his cabinet ministers as a goodbye present. We're told it was an emotional meeting, although Keir Starmer will know that some of those around his cabinet table played a role in his downfall, so perhaps mixed emotions there. Also emotional during Prime Minister's questions, particularly when Keir Starmer was talking about some of those people that he feels his government have helped since he has been Prime Minister. He also got very emotional talking about his support for Ukraine and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, particularly after Volodymyr Zelensky was, in Keir Starmer's words, attacked in the White House and then was welcomed to Britain the following day to a rather different reception. Kemi Badenoch expressed her admiration for the Prime Minister, the leader of the opposition, talking in quite glowing terms about Keir Starmer during their final back and forth across the dispatch box in PMQs. As I say, he's not yet out of a job, but that will come very soon. On Friday, we expect the announcement that Andy Burnham, the MP for Makerfield and former Greater Manchester Mayor, will be announced as the new Labour leader. And then on Monday, Andy Burnham will take over as Prime Minister. There were various mentions in PMQs of what some opposition politicians see as a lack of scrutiny for Andy Burnham because Parliament will be on recess when he becomes Prime Minister. And also some critics say Andy Burnham hasn't yet set out a clear policy agenda and therefore has a lack of mandate when he takes over the role. Keir Starmer, during Prime Minister's questions, insisting that he would give his wholehearted support to his successor, would only give him advice in private if it was asked for, and wouldn't be setting out that advice to his successor in public. As I say, an emotional day for Keir Starmer ahead of leaving the job. Keir Starmer described this at the end of PMQs as the end of his political journey. Andy Burnham, when he becomes Prime Minister, knows that he faces a long and difficult to-do list of challenges that the UK currently faces. Ollie Barrett in London for A News.
Back to the region now. The destruction of cultural heritage in Karabakh has drawn international attention for years. However, questions remain in the absence of a comprehensive UNESCO mission, despite repeated calls and negotiations. Here's more.
What happens when heritage is destroyed, but the international inspectors never arrive? For years, Azerbaijan asked UNESCO to examine cultural sites damaged in territories then under Armenian control. No comprehensive mission was deployed. After the 2020 war, UNESCO proposed sending experts. That mission also stalled. Why did scrutiny fail before the war and again afterwards? According to Azerbaijani official figures, the scale of destruction was vast. Some sites were reduced to ruins. Others were stripped of stone, inscriptions, or artifacts. Azerbaijan says it repeatedly requested a UNESCO fact-finding mission. UNESCO maintained that access required agreement from the parties concerned. The result was clear. No inspectors, no complete inventory, no international assessment made at the time. Claims that Caucasian Albanian inscriptions were altered also remain disputed and unverified by UNESCO. After the 2020 war, UNESCO proposed an independent technical mission under the 1954 Hague Convention. Azerbaijan said it did not oppose inspection, but it sought agreement on the mission's terms of reference, its route and list of sites, the wording used to describe the territory. Baku objected to the title Mission to Karabakh and proposed Mission to the Karabakh region of Azerbaijan. UNESCO did not accept that wording. There were also disputes over which Christian and Muslim sites would be examined. Agreement never came. The mission stalled. The dispute soon moved beyond monuments. Azerbaijani officials and media reports alleged political influence over technical decisions, restrictions on cooperation with Baku, pressure against Azerbaijan inside UNESCO bodies. These are serious claims. They require documents, named sources, and a full response from UNESCO and the former officials concerned. What is already clear is that trust had broken down. The argument was no longer only about heritage. It was about who defined the mission, selected the sites, and shaped the record. UNESCO has acted in conflicts from Mali to Ukraine. Each case is different, but Karabakh still raises three questions. Did UNESCO use every available tool to gain access before 2020? Were the post-war terms broad enough to examine all damaged heritage? Why is there still no comprehensive assessment accepted by all sides? The monuments were damaged, the mission did not arrive, and without an agreed international record, heritage became another front in the conflict.
Well, joining us now to talk on this further is Shabnam Safarova, chair of the Public Union for Progress of Karabakh. Shabnam, welcome. Thank you so much for coming on the program. For starters, can you briefly walk us through why these UNESCO missions never materialized?
If honestly, the answer of this question is very interesting for us as well as members of civil society, And we wonder why UNESCO called all this process like it is political issue and we cannot do any intervention until 2020, because we have to approach this issue up to 2020 and after. Azerbaijan, as I remember, Azerbaijan government and non-governmental organizations of Azerbaijan several times addressed UNESCO and other related international organizations to send fact-finding mission to Karabakh for investigation process of herbicide, because it actually was herbicide. We are not talking about only destruction of one or two monuments. It was total destruction in Karabakh. But unfortunately, in that times, Armenian side has limited the access of mission to the territory. And in that case, the argument told by UNESCO, mentioned by UNESCO, was like, it is political issue and we don't want to make intervention in that issue. If it was political issue, why after Second Karabakh War, UNESCO suddenly had a wish to come to Karabakh for finding some, let's say, arguments, or for finding facts or collecting facts and etc.
Well, UNESCO has played and is playing its role in a number of conflict and post-conflict zones. The wars following the breakup of Yugoslavia, the current Russia-Ukraine war. As someone who closely follows all of these developments, what do you believe will take for UNESCO to actually send a fact-finding mission?
I think it is never late, and Azerbaijan's approach in this issue is straightforward. Just as an international organization, UNESCO has to accept to respect territorial integrity of Azerbaijan, because it is not just a wording issue, or it is not just technical issue. It is about the respect to territorial integrity of Azerbaijan, and it is quite normal request by Azerbaijan to want these respect, because you know what Azerbaijan has done for reaching the justice in this order, sometimes totally alone in the field. And that's why, first of all, as an international and transparent organization, I think they have to approach with respect for territorial integrity of Azerbaijan. And the second one, Azerbaijan and all interested parties have to be clear and have to be sure that the mission activity will be transparent and without any double standards, because there are monuments and like cultural heritage, Muslims, Christians, Caucasian Albania, and etc. So that's why this mission, the expectations from this mission is transparency and approach without any double standards.
And Shabnam, on the Karabakh region itself, it has suffered extensive damage during the decades of conflict. We've seen some of the numbers in the story before this conversation, but reconstruction is underway. What would you point to as the main successes so far, and what remains to be done?
Thanks God, we are in modern, let's say, world where we can use satellite, let's say, views methodology, or some help of artificial intelligence tools, or any digital tools for recognizing, let's say, what was going on in that region. So I think still we have chance for this investigation. But for sure, at the end of the day, there are thousands of people waiting for going to their lands, to their homes, and Azerbaijan cannot stop reconstruction process. because of all this, let's say, issues. That's why, yes, it is like maybe a dilemma sometimes, but I think with using modern methodologies or maybe satellite views, at least we can compare what was happened 30 years ago and how was a view, let's say, 20 years ago or 10 years ago. The only way I see like that.
Obviously, as these reconstruction and rebuilding efforts are ongoing, Azerbaijan argues that the lack of an international mission allowed evidence to disappear and competing narratives to harden. How much has that delay damaged the search for accountability?
There were some investigations by government and by NGOs, maybe by some international organizations. At least maybe it was not field investigation, but it was like, let's say, as I mentioned, by satellite views and etc. But at least I want to mention one fact, which was mentioned by the president of Azerbaijan, by Ilham Aliyev as well. Out of 67 mosques, the 65 of them were destroyed. And some cities were just, now government is building that cities from scratch, for example, Agdam. So that's why we can at least imagine the size of destruction. And at least at the end of the day, it's very hard to rebuild to all these territories, especially we are in the peacemaking process. So I think all this dilemma, they have not limit the interest of communities for this peacemaking process. That's why we require respect and transparency in this process.
And Shabnam, briefly, we are running out of time, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. How important is it that any future mission examines Muslim, Christian, and Caucasian Albanian heritage under the same standards?
It is, it's crucial issue. So I think the same standards have to be applied to all kind of monuments, to all kind of heritage. It is must be, without it, without double standards, we cannot accept any report transparent and acceptable.
Shabnam, thank you so much for joining us on A News and sharing your insight.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, after a short break, confirmed cases of Ebola in the DRC topped the 2,000 mark, and the outbreak is still spreading. Do stay with us. Welcome back. You are watching A News. Health authorities in the Democratic Republic of Congo say confirmed cases of Ebola have topped the 2,000 mark in the country. The outbreak is now spreading to new areas. Chris Ochamringa reports from Kinshasa.
The Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo has spread to 2 new areas in the northeast of the country, bringing to 5 the number of provinces that have recorded cases. Authorities recently confirmed cases in the provinces of Otuele and Chopo, raising fears of a wider geographical spread. The World Health Organization has called for intensified surveillance, warning that the outbreak is spreading faster than health workers can track it. The global body's Assistant Director General of Health, Chikwe Yekweazu, made the revelation after visiting the epicenter of the outbreak in Ituri province. He said 80% of new Ebola cases are emerging from unknown chains of transmission. That is happening despite health workers stepping up contact tracing for Ebola patients. The fight against Ebola was recently disrupted by a strike among some health workers over unpaid salaries and allowances. The DRC government has promised to resolve the problem. The Ebola outbreak circulating in the DRC is driven by the rare Bundibuja strain, for which there is no approved vaccine or specific treatment yet. scientists are currently conducting clinical trials for 2 potential drugs that could stop patient deaths. The response to the outbreak has been hampered by mistrust from some community members who do not believe Ebola exists, and by insecurity in the mineral-rich regions of the northeast and eastern parts of the DRC. Rebel groups in Ituri, North Kivu and South Kivu provinces make it very challenging for health workers to curb the spread of Ebola. The Africa Center for Disease Control and Prevention has appealed to donors for more funding to contain the fast-spreading disease. Chris Ochamringa for A News in Kinshasa.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and several top officials have held closed-door discussions with Pakistan's army chief. The meeting comes amid expanding defense ties between the two countries. Adam Morrow reports from Istanbul.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has received Pakistan's army chief, Field Marshal Syed Asim Munir, in Turkish capital Ankara. According to Erdogan's office, the closed-door meeting took place at Ankara's Esenboğa airport on Tuesday. The talks were also attended by Turkish Vice President Cevdet Yılmaz, Army Chief of Staff Selçuk Bayraktaroğlu, and National Intelligence Director Ibrahim Kalin. Neither side has yet released details about the discussions or indicated whether any agreements were reached. The meeting comes against the backdrop of deepening political, military, and defense industrial relations between Turkey and Pakistan. The two countries have long maintained friendly ties and have continued to broaden cooperation in a range of fields, from defense manufacturing and military training to counter-terrorism and regional security. In recent years, defense cooperation has become a key pillar of the relationship. Turkey has supplied Pakistan with military equipment and upgraded Pakistani naval and aviation platforms, while the two countries have also pursued a number of joint defense projects. Examples of these include Turkey's Milgem corvette program, under which 4 warships were built for Pakistan's Navy, as well as modernization initiatives involving Pakistan's fleet of military aircraft. Ankara and Islamabad also coordinate closely on regional and international issues, and their armed forces regularly carry out joint military exercises. Tuesday's meeting comes at a time of heightened security challenges in the Middle East and South Asia, making Munir's discussions with Turkey's political, military, and intelligence leadership particularly significant. This is Adam Morrow for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan have installed the first permanent markers along their shared border, advancing a landmark agreement aimed at ending decades of territorial disputes. Sevil Rajapova has more on that in Tashkent.
Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan have started installing the first permanent border markers along the 1,008-kilometer shared frontier, beginning at the point where the borders of Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan and Uzbekistan meet. The move follows the March 2025 border treaty signed by President Sadir Japarov and Emomali Rahmon, which formally settled one of Central Asia's longest-running territorial disputes after more than 2 decades of negotiations. The agreement came after years of deadly border clashes, including violence in 2021 and 2022, that claimed thousands of lives and displaced thousands of residents. Since demarcation work began, joint survey teams have inspected more than 416 kilometers of the border and identified locations for nearly 2,000 boundary pillars. Officials from both countries jointly installed the first 4 permanent markers. Authorities claim completed demarcation will provide legal certainty for the border, improve security in frontier regions, and create new opportunities for cross-border trade, infrastructure development, and economic cooperation between the two neighboring countries. It is Sevil Rajapova reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
A UK court is reviewing a legal challenge to China's planned embassy in London in a case that highlights the sensitive balance between diplomatic engagement and local concerns. Abuhayat Jafarova reports from Beijing.
Britain's approval of China's planned embassy in London is being challenged in court by a group of local residents who argue officials did not fully assess the project's impact on protests and the surrounding community. The embassy, said to be built at the historic Royal Mint Court near the Tower of London, was approved in January as part of broader efforts to improve UK-China relations. While some British and US politicians voiced concerns over the project, British intelligence agencies said any potential risks could be effectively managed. Residents argue ministers should have given greater consideration to the site's potential security implications. However, lawyers representing the UK government maintain those concerns were fully examined during the approval process. The legal challenge comes months after 2 men were sentenced in the UK to 10 and 8 years in prison in a case involving the alleged surveillance of Hong Kong activists. China has firmly rejected the accusations, describing the convictions as a political move of abusing the law and allegations of Chinese espionage as a malicious slander. Beijing has consistently called for relations with Western countries to be based on mutual respect and constructive dialogue, despite ongoing differences on a range of issues. Abukhaya Jafarova, A News, Beijing, China.
One more story before we go. A 67-million-year-old fossil named Gus has sold for just over $50 million at Sotheby's auction in New York. The Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton is nearly 12 meters long and was discovered 5 years ago in South Dakota on a privately owned ranch.
A nearly 12-meter-long Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton has sold for a record $50.1 million at Sotheby's in New York. The 67-million-year-old fossil, known as Gus, exceeded its pre-sale estimate of $20 to $30 million and broke the previous dinosaur auction record set in 2024.
Gus is one of the biggest and most complete T-Rex ever found. It was first discovered about 5 years ago in South Dakota near Hardin County on a privately owned huge parcel of ranch land. It's named Gus after the rancher who owned the land. He sadly passed about a year into the excavation, so we named the specimen in his honor.
The mounted skeleton is approximately 61% complete by bone count, containing 183 fossilized elements and 30 belly ribs. It stands about 3.8 meters tall, while its skull measures roughly 1.4 meters and is more than 80% represented. The sale also included copyright linked to the specimen, giving the buyer rights connected to reproductions, an unusual feature for a T-Rex offered at auction.
The concept of having this massive class of animals that ruled the earth and to have them gone, I think it really helps us to contemplate our own mortality and think about, we think that we're the big, strong thing on this planet. This could happen to us too.
Gus was offered as part of Sotheby's Geek Week Natural History Sale and surpassed the $44.6 million record previously held by the Stegosaurus skeleton Apex.
Well, that's all we have for you for now. Thank you so much for watching and stay tuned to A News.